Don't call me.
Thank you, Wilson. I think you're getting a little bit of feedback. It might be Joe's cat. So I am based out of Washington. We're going to kick this off, though, with a breakout. So, and then Sarah, Joe, and I are going to introduce ourselves in a bit. Unless, Joe, you want to introduce yourself now. I think you just came off mute for a second. Why don't we all introduce Sarah, Joe, why don't we introduce ourselves, and then I'll get the question ready.
All right, I'm Sarah Hausberg. I am basically, I've got a 3-man show going on in Cle Elum, Washington. We're right in the center of the state. Our entire school district has less than 1,000 kids. At my school, we have anywhere from 20 to 30. I'm the program director. I'm our advisor. I've got a staff that has a secretary / everything and a paraeducator / everything. In our town, we're super small. If I want to go to Target or Costco or anywhere, it's going to be an 1.5-hour drive. So if that kind of gives you our setting.
Shoot, Joe has been having some technical difficulties. Seems like he might still be having those. Joe is in Selah, Washington, which is a similar setting, closer to Yakima, Washington, Eastern Washington. A couple of weeks ago, I was down in Cloverdale, California, which is by K, and a town of 8,000 folks, right? There's a lot of our big picture schools are in, and a growing number are in ruralish or small communities or one-room schools, right? Where people like Sarah are wearing, every hat. The school in Cloverdale is working with the advisor, is also the school leader, is also the internship coordinator, is also the fill in the blank. So this, we'll give you more of a background of how this came to be. But we've been having in the Northwest and California, kind of West Coast-ish United States, we've been having a ruralish monthly call since February. And the purpose of this time is for us to make some connections and to extend an invite to y'all into the next year version of this and invite you to help shape how we come together as a community. As Joe Davis said today in the anti-racist plenary session, we all do better when we all do better. And I think that is at the core of what we're doing here. So the breakout question, Wilson, are you dropping it in or am I dropping it in? I think you're dropping it in.
I'll drop it in.
Thank you. The breakout session, Wilson's going to put us into breakouts in a second. Thinking about what brought you here, right? What kind of shifts have you made? Or will you make, or could you make in doing big picture in your environment based on being in a small community or at a small school? Wilson, Sarah, how about the idea here? We're making connections with each other across context. So 9 minutes, 10 minutes?
10 minutes sounds good to me.
Perfect. And the question is in the chat as well.
You ready to go?
Ready to go.
Let's rock.
How are you, Liz?
I'm good.
Welcome back, everybody.
Hello. I apologize for the screaming in the background. You can hear it. So I'm going to do just a quick, I touched on this briefly, but a quick history of how we got here. Oh, but first, actually, sorry. We want to hear some highlights. What are some things that you heard other people say about shifts they've made or about their context that you're going to take with you, or you want to, yeah, thank you. I don't need to apologize for my children screaming. Some things you want to take with you or you heard that's resonating with you about something somebody else shared. I'm going to take notes in that note deck that I shared.
I'll go, Lauren, if you like.
Please.
Really interested talking about family and beliefs, and actually how the families bring so much to the community of the school, and occupations and expertise that a lot of the fishing communities bringing in, sharing that and good techniques, and we reflected as well on the family links that we have, and and how important that is to us. And obviously we're looking back at the the authentic assessment, the thing about moving into post-education and that kind of, and also just the taking the time to get to know families in a way that sometimes isn't possible or doesn't happen in other institutions.
Lori brought up just the importance of hiring the right staff and, not just picking whoever has the most experience, but finding those people who get what we're doing, who have those same beliefs, who want to grow, who want to take chances, because that's what builds these amazing programs, not somebody who's done it one way for 100 years.
Bringing up finding the right person came up in our group as well. Being able to just get the right person who, even if they don't understand big picture learning, that they can get to the point, like that just has a mind for the equity journey. But something else that came up when we were talking was critical race theory, and how when students are interested in things around those topics, it dovetails back into people in your community, and how if there are people in your community who really do not want to have that theory taught, or if they're sneaking it in legislature in New Hampshire, that that does put a limit on what we can offer students, or that there are consequences when we do offer them choices.
Something that came up in our breakout room. Hi everybody, I'm from Barbados, quite different to everybody else here. I'm from the Caribbean. And I'm from Beyond the Box Education. Something that came up in our group was actually balancing our national testing rubrics and stuff, very, very rigorous. We subscribe to something called CXC, which is our Caribbean testing board. Very, very, very rigorous. It's ancient years old, and we still put the kids through it. So kind of learning and shifting to balance that, because some of our parents and some of our kids are still subject to that national testing, and balancing it with this new and refreshing way to look at education and it being student-centered instead of the old way, which is what we've known for centuries, which would more be, is centered around the tests and adults and all of those rubrics, not really about the kids. So kind of balancing that, because we still need results in a certain way, because whether or not we want to admit it, we are kind of competing against other schools and other kids, trying to get them into college and stuff like that. It's competition. So yeah, kind of just like balancing that out for us. Yeah.
When I first encountered big picture, I was really uncomfortable with silent time. And now I feel like there's a need to embrace it. That's where a lot of great stuff emerges.
I'll bring up one more thing that was said in our group. We had a couple of schools that are in the alternative world, and the importance of having the community outreach events and community service and just doing all those different things to change the stigma of alternative school. One of the best things that ever happened to my program, I was going to say it and then I got cut off, was one of our top real estate agents decided to send her son to us. So we have a prominent real estate agent in our community selling all of these homes and saying, if you want your child to get the best education possible, you send them to Swiftwater, because they're going to be taken care of. They're going to be doing all these different things. So it was just a really cool connection that we didn't even think about. But, we've traditionally served kids who have struggled in school. And now we've got these 4.0 kids coming to us and saying, hey, we'd like to give you a try because it's not working at the high school for us either.
Well, thank you for sharing those. I think it was maybe last, Joe, Sarah, tell me if I'm wrong here, but I think it was last winter at some point, close to the new year. Some principals, we were meeting weekly as school leaders, and some principals named that some of the leadership challenges in ruralish communities or extremely small schools are different than some of the larger schools or the urbanish environments. And so we started this monthly call in February. And in the note deck, I attached the notes, if you scroll down from the monthly meetings that we were hosting. Some of the topics were, hiring, student recruiting, onboarding. So I'm gonna hand it over to Joe and Sarah in a moment. But I wanna just keep bringing up this invitation to folks to participate in this in whatever form it takes next year. And at the end, we'll name some topics, and also if folks want to be added to the email list and the invitations, we'll collect those at the end if you want to share them. So Sarah and Joe have been two of the principals that have contributed so much to this community. I had a chance to visit for the first time Joe's school. This is my introduction to you, Joe. I'll hand it over to you in a second. I had a chance to visit Joe's school a couple weeks ago. And two things that really stood out to me, I think, that are indicative of Joe's leadership, but also connected to the ruralish theme, is that Joe and the two advisors are a team that love each other. And that really stuck out. And clearly love each other, trust each other, can challenge each other. And know they are there for each other in all sorts of ways, and there for their students. And I think that's something, talking about a staff of 2 teachers, that's very, that's even more important. It's always important, but that hiring and that community, if one of the 2 teachers, that's 50% of the staff, right? If somebody feels like they're left out, or some, onboarding, all those different challenges are different. The other thing that shining a light on another part of Joe's brilliance is the way Joe has been able to navigate systems in his district and propose solutions and help folks think about policy or ways to support his community, I think is Jedi-like. So I'm gonna pass it over to Joe to share a little bit about what his leadership has been and maybe some of the shifts he's made in a ruralish environment. And then we'll go to Sarah. Sarah, what I will say, Sarah's ability to shine a light and tell students stories and share the brilliance from student projects, student stories, inspires a lot of the schools out here, and I find a lot of inspiration in it, and it inspires other ideas too. So you'll hear from both of them in a moment. Handing it over to Joe and Sarah as they're sharing. If you have questions or you're, spark something for you, drop it in the chat, or and I'll try to read questions as they come up for Joe and Sarah.
Thank you, Lauren. That was a very nice introduction. Everybody hear me okay? Thumbs up. Awesome. My name is Joe Cosker. This is my end of my 30th year in education, started my 31st, looking forward to it. My 9th at Sela Academy in alternative or choice learning. I started out as a social studies teacher, driver's ed teacher, became an activity director and eventually an athletic director, and never thought that I would get the opportunity to work in alternative or choice education, and knew nothing about big picture 9 years ago, but got my introduction about 3.5 years ago. And one of the things that I always learned in my 9 years of doing alternative education is flexible and adaptable. It's our mantra, just nonstop at Sela Academy. And I know a lot of you probably live by that same creed. You got to be flexible and adaptable. I've got a big picture learning school. I've got an online school. I've got an ALE in Washington State where kids only have to check in once a week. I've got a facility down the road that works with young people and adults in drug and alcohol rehabilitation. So I've got staffing out there. I've got a K-8 parent partnership program. And so that's part of what Lauren was talking about with navigating systems. So one of the things I know that you all bring to the table is a whole lot of diversity in your programs and your systems. So let me start by saying rural, we don't want to define it as you got to have this many 100 or 1,000, right? Rural is what it means to you. And so how do all of us, before COVID, right? We all had to make adaptions to what we did because we get so many different kids every year. I'm looking forward to this year. I'm a little scared about this year because it's going to be a totally different year. We graduated in our second year of big picture learning, a couple of our pillars. And I'm looking forward to what they do with their life, but it's going to be a totally different chapter and a totally different big picture SELA, COVID or non-COVID, in person or Zoom, it doesn't matter. So rural is what it is to you. And I have really enjoyed our conversations this year with folks from Northern California, Idaho, Oregon State, all over the Pacific Northwest and sometimes beyond. And great to have an international audience here to talk about recruiting, not just students, but families, not just onboarding students, but their families and onboarding new staff. And I wrote this in all capital letters. Every year is onboarding, every year. That was one of the big things that I took from our time together. All kinds of things about learning plans and learning through interests, transition from COVID, ways to help kids come back on campus that have been deeply scarred. Summer learning, right? And do we do like a mini exhibition of learning in the fall? You know, the old write a 50, word essay on what you did this summer. No, do an exhibition of learning. Show us the pictures on your phone. Celebrate the car you rebuilt, things like that. And then site visits and being able to have a partnership with people like my friend in Cleo, and then I'll hand it over to here in just a moment. So welcome to all of you and look forward to hearing some of the things that and learning more about as we open up our rural-ish group next year to a even bigger audience. So with that said, I welcome back Sarah. Cle Elum is about 50 minutes from where I live, driving as if you're going towards Seattle over the mountains here in Washington State, but on the same side of the mountains as we are in central and eastern Washington, and had the pleasure of hosting them when they were considering big picture learning here, Sarah, a year and a half, maybe even 2 years ago. It was pre-COVID, I know that. So almost.
Yeah, it was about a year and a half ago.
Yeah. So Sarah, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Joe. So the easy transition for me is utilizing the small schools that are around you. And by around, I don't, our closest one is a minimum 50 miles away. But without those other schools, we would have never started. And what I think is so great about our small school network is that everybody is willing to help and there's no stupid questions. And when you're a rookie like me, they're so helpful because they've gone through they've been in the trenches and they know the struggles. One of the things Joe said was, you can't really define rural by a number or anything. And that's true because where we're at in Cle Elum, we consider SELA, where Joe is, a big area. Their access to Yakima and bigger industries and just overall resources is far greater than ours. We have a bunch of family-owned shops. Our source of revenue is tourism. Right across the street from my building is a massive 5-star luxury resort. And the people where we live hate them because they have access to all of these resources and things that we can't use. Like they drive in their very fancy cars, their Teslas, all these things. And we're like, that's cool. like, can you help us out? But it, you know, it doesn't really work that way. They're pretty much their own thing. But what we can do is we can reach out to them and say, what kind of partnerships can we form to help our students get out of the situations that they're in? So they can have more resources, they can see hope for a future, any of that stuff. So one of the things that my students kind of challenged me with this spring was to help them all find jobs. So we had every single job available in Upper Kittitas County listed up on our whiteboard. And they were applying for jobs and they weren't having a whole lot of success. And I said, well, Hausberg, let's see if you can get a job. So I said, okay. So I started applying for jobs with them. And nothing was happening. I wasn't getting phone calls back. And I was like, you guys, are you getting jobs? And they're like, yeah. I was like, well, why are you getting them and I'm not? And they're like, I don't know, maybe we're qualified because we have experience working in fast food or whatever. So I finally got a job at the resort, slinging beer at the pool. But as a result, I have met so many people who say, so what's your real job? What pays the bills? And I tell them what I do. And they're like, here's my business card. Do you want money for your program? Do you want mentors? Do you want jobs? Like, what do you need? And so I've started putting myself out there to all these people. And now I'm getting people who want to work with my kids who are all over the state of Washington. So that's been really exciting. The other part of our success is my secretary, who's married to a lifelong Cle Elum resident. And in a small town, that means everything, especially here. So when she goes to the community and asks them for things, they have no problem saying, heck yeah, Michelle, let's do this. And so I work with the outsiders, Michelle works with the locals, and it's been wonderful to help change the perception of what our program is. Another thing that I've really enjoyed with our network is the idea of celebrating. I came to the rural group and I said, I don't know, I guess it was May. And I said, you guys, I have this idea for senior exhibitions. And my idea, to me, it was kind of out there, but I thought it would be good. Each senior had over the year developed some sort of strength. One of my kids is an actor. He put on this really great performance, won some awards in the community. I had another kid who has a massive family and they have no money. So he would come in and say, Ms. Hausberg, can we cook something for my family? So he learned how to cook all these different meals. And so all these kids started gaining these skills and they kind of honed in on what was their skill. So for our showcase, I said, hey, you guys, I want you to teach us your skill. And I brought it to the group and I was like, is this ridiculous? Like, does this miss the mark for exhibitions? Lauren and Joe and the gals from California were like, do it and let's see what happens. It was the best day of my life, you guys. Like, it made my mom heart happy, my teacher heart, my community heart. Like, it was the coolest thing because these kids who have no business hanging out together and befriending each other were so supportive and so willing to take risks. I mean, they were one kid who joined our program late as a special education student did a rap in front of all these kids that he didn't really know that well. And then his mentor did a rap back to him on talking about how proud of him he was. It was just the coolest thing. And, you know, we did this really great day for them. And when we were coming back, the kids were like, you know, Hausberg, it'd be really cool if we could connect with kids from other rural schools like ours. So I told Lauren, I said, hey, we have this idea. Can we make it happen? And the response was basically, make it happen. So my kids and I, our goal for this year is to create a rural network for the kids in our area where we can start doing stuff as a group. So hopefully with the COVID restrictions lifting, we can call Joe and say, hey, Joe, I've got money to do this. Do you want to bring your kids along? Or our superintendent was like, you know, I would love to get a panel going that can communicate to local leaders to talk about the importance of big picture learning, the change in stigma with alternative education. Let's get all these rural kids together and create a panel. So Joe doesn't know that yet, but we've got big plans for him too.
There's a lot of fun stuff coming up in the chat. Christy, I wonder if I can put you on the spot. If you'd be willing to share a little bit, or if anybody has any other experience of Christy put in the chat how, and this has come up in the north in the other schools that around our region too, that are talking about connecting with mentors and community partners virtually across contexts. That's something that I heard a lot in the rural calls, is that we might not have this person in our community, but could we start to share some of our mentors? But Chrissy, if you're willing to share anything on that, or I didn't ask for permission, so or in the chat if you don't want to.
No, it's fine. Because I mean, it's hard when you live in a smaller city. I mean, we're not in a tiny city, but we're still considered a small city. And so like our kids, like they don't even really, like Boise's only like a 15-20 minute drive from Nampa, but we have a lot of kids in our school who don't go to Nampa because that's far. That's the big city. It's scary kind of, they're not familiar with it. And so just like whenever we're just doing our leaving and learns and trying to get people to go out and about, sometimes they're like, they're not willing to get out of their comfort zone. But I felt like with Zoom, I've been able to see kids where like it's become more comfortable for them to talk to people that they don't know. Like there's a little bit of a comfort and like there's a screen there, you're not really there, but you are kind of thing. And so I feel like that's kind of opened up the possibilities for them to be able to like reach out a little bit more and be willing to put themselves out and be open to other opportunities. Like even Zot, whenever, because my kids, we participate in Zot throughout the year. And my kids really loved it. They really thrived. They're constantly, we'd get off and they're still talking about all these people they met from like Italy and like wherever. And it's just like, it's opened up doors. And now they, whoa, sorry, cats. That I feel like it's just kind of made the world a little bit more accessible to them, I think. I don't know. I ramble. I'm going to stop now.
No, I echo what Christy said, and you weren't rambling at all. That was great stuff. We live 5 minutes away. Our school is 5 minutes away on a freeway and a US highway to Yakima. And we have been stunned at how many of our kids have never ventured outside of Selah, Washington. When we took them to the Yakima Indian Nation Tribal House and Museum, which is in Toppenish, a town about 25 minutes away, not one of them had ever been there, not one. And neither had my two adult advisors. You're right on the money. It's challenging kids and giving them the opportunities, even if they're virtual.
How many of you guys have access in your communities to public transportation? Just thumbs up if you have it. Okay, so there's a lot of you. We, up until last year, maybe the year before, we didn't. And one of our local community resources developed a bus that would go from Cle Elum to Ellensburg. That's our big city, which is still super small, 30 minutes away. And we had to teach the kids how to ride that because it was totally foreign to them. And when I worked at a big picture learning school in the city, the kids had to teach me how to ride the metro because I had no clue what to do.
Yeah, transportation seems to be such a frequent dilemma, right? And at a school in California I worked with, they said the same thing. They had like buses that, because the kids would live like 45 minutes away from the school, right? Same district. And so they would have a bus that would do these like giant loops, right? And kids would sometimes be sitting on it for 45 minutes. At least it got people around town. In that same district, the superintendent took a job with Uber on the weekends. Similar, I think, to Sarah slinging beer to get to know people in the community.
We did, because our community is so small, I shared this in my breakout, like we had to change our internship days at one point because there were so few mentors available to our students at that time that we split 2 grade levels on these 2 days and the other 2 on these other 2 days to kind of maximize our availability for internships. But we were able to get bus passes to go into the big scary city of Boise, and a lot of students were terrified of it. So we had to do leaving to learns just to teach them to do the buses. But even then, a lot of parents are like, no, my kid's not riding on the bus. No, that's too far. That's too scary. You're not doing that. So it's again, like what Sarah was talking about too, like communicating with the families and the onboarding and the community to like help them understand and feel more comfortable to get outside of that box. Because I think that's the scary part in living in a smaller town is everything's scary. Like just busier traffic even can stress out a person. So it affects, yeah.
And really, if I can add to that, it's that fear of the unknown, right? So when you talk about the fear of the unknown, you start with a bus, and then you can take it to talking about racial equality. There is so much of the conversation that's been happening for the last 3 months in our school board meetings that's just been based on pure ignorance. People who have never been outside of our little town, people who have not even thought about having a conversation about race. And shame on us if I, as a white male, don't start that conversation and wade through some of the awkwardness of dealing with people yelling at me, telling me that I'm whatever, because again, those are conversations that haven't happened because it's unknown, it's awkward, it's scary. And I think that's one of the things in a rural community. We had the worst COVID rate in the West Coast of the entire United States last year. And now there's a county an hour and a half down the road that holds that title. And again, unfortunately, sometimes in rural communities, it's the fear of the unknown. So I love what Sarah's talking about, what Christy's talking about, whether it's a bus or it's conversations around race, it's got to happen. We're the educators who can help make that happen by building relationships.
I think the kids want to have those conversations and they want to learn about those things, but they might not necessarily have that support at home to have those conversations. So I was waiting for the right time to show a piece of artwork that one of my students did this year. And we are a very, very conservative area. And so it's going to be hard to see, but she basically made a mural of 2020, starting with the death for her. It started with the death of Kobe Bryant. And then we moved into election. And the fact that she even put Biden-Harris 2020 on there had people work. And then she went into Zoom, the fires that were happening across the world, the masks and COVID, and a lot of people here don't think COVID's a real thing. And then she really got people worked when she brought in Black Lives Matter and police brutality and all of those things. And she asked me, she said, Ms. Hausberg, is this offensive? And I said, no, you're documenting what happened. And she said, well, is your husband going to be upset when he comes in and sees my painting that has Black Lives Matters on it because he's a police officer? And I said, no, he is going to be proud of you for doing your research and asking questions and doing all of these things. And she's like, really? He supports us? And I said, yes, he supports us. But the fact that she had to ask, that was like, dang, we got to do more as schools to let the kids know that it's okay.
I'd love to send a thank you note to that student since you shared that. It was beautiful.
This whole conference, I've been coming up with ideas for her to lead for next year.
Nice.
I feel like there's sort of a theme that we've kind of hit upon here that haven't really named it sort of in its most simple terms. And I think it has a lot to do with trust, right? I work with a population of students who have, terribly, terribly traumatic experiences, and it takes a long time to build that trust with them, so that they're willing to take a risk, so that they're willing to have uncomfortable conversations. And I think that building that trust with the communities and with the families that also rely on us is every bit as important as building the trust with the student and to get them to take a risk, right? I think it comes from a place of discomfort, right? Because not only is the message unfamiliar in a lot of cases, right? But the trust has also not been established as firmly as it could be in order to get those things to actually get off the ground.
So thank you for naming that theme, that topic. I want to invite in the last few minutes here, what are some other topics or questions or struggles or dilemmas that folks are experiencing that are, specific to rural-ish or small communities?
I have one. So I just created my background to sort of like display what my big concern is, and that is being an out lesbian in a tiny town. I came from a really small conservative town, and it was not at all friendly or accepting or kind, and just really super ugly things happened there. And I'm just moving now to this place and starting fresh and hoping that the climate has shifted. But I'm basically, I know that it's important to be out. I know that there are kids who need this, and that's not a question. And it's not like I'm offering to do anything else. But, I know about creating safety for kids, but how do I create safety for myself? It's a lot of silence, you guys.
No, Kay, I would echo that, because I know that that's something I've heard in my learning community as well. And I'll tell you what's interesting is I grew up in Zillah, Washington, which is really close to Selah, and I know exactly where Cle Elum is. But my family's Native American, so we're always going to the Yakima Indian Cultural Center. I'm surprised that was the only time that those students had gone there. It's a really cool place. But when I hear things about being able to feel safe yourself and being able to trust, that I know is true for a few of the faculty that I work with, and it's been an ongoing concern. I'm not sure what to do about that, but it's one of those things where you give up a question and then hope you get a good answer. I have found that to be the case, not just with my current faculty, but with the other faculties I've worked with before too. It's hard to be authentic in yourself when you have a reason to be fearful otherwise.
Well, I'll just speak to that as a school leader, and be as authentic as I can. I have come from a very conservative background, spiritually as well as politically in my past. And to me, as the leader of a public school, it's my job to set the tone and set the culture and co-create and co-share that culture with my staff and my students. And so when I think about 4 or 5 years ago was the first time that I had any students that I knew were not straight. And the first issue that came up was bathrooms. We had 2 bathrooms, and how are we going to navigate if someone identifies as a female that was biologically a male at birth, And so we've come in a short time a long ways with that, and me personally as a leader. But I would encourage all the other school leaders out there to model that, and to, again, a big journey for me has been shared leadership, and to realize that I may have the title, and this is what Lauren was talking about a little bit when he came to visit us, is that the leadership is shared between myself and my two advisors, and I lean heavily on them. So earlier today, when one of them was introduced as the school leader, accidentally, I took no offense to it whatsoever, because he is. And okay, my paycheck's a little bigger. Who cares? That has nothing to do with what we can contribute to the culture of a school. And so I don't know if that's a good answer or not, Kay, but that's my thought is school leaders. And I would challenge anyone out there. I don't know if we have any district leaders. We've got great district leadership in our school district that's not afraid to deal with some of the junk they've been dealing with in school board meetings of late. Has just been ridiculous when I've watched some of those meetings on YouTube. And I call my superintendent all the time just to tell him to hang in there, tell him I'm praying for him, and asking him what I can do to help. And I hope that you'll get that same support, Kay, in your new community.
Well, thank you. I feel compelled to just clarify something. I'm lesbian, not transgender, so the bathroom issue is different from what I was talking about. I recognize, we accept T into the LGBT community, and transgender people need all the support that gay and lesbian people and bisexual people and queer people do too. But I just want to clarify that is a separate thing.
Again, and I understood that. I just was trying to go for the whole spectrum there, I guess.
Well, I wonder if folks have other topics they'd like to, well, I guess there's two parts to this question. If you would like to continue in conversations like this with folks that are in rural-ish or small communities, please either put your email in the chat, or you can email me at the email that I just dropped into the chat, and we'll be reaching out to you. Last year, I don't know if we're going to do it this way this year. Last year we did, I think it was the last Friday. Anyway, it was on Fridays. It was either the first or the last Friday of every month. I think it was the last Friday. But we'll be sending it out. This is completely, voluntary, of course. And also, if you have topics the topics were user generated, it very much did not want it to be. There was no, scope or sequence to it, right? It was, what are the things that folks are wrestling with? How can we get together around this? I remember similar but different to what you brought up, Kay. Similar but very different. One of the school principals was told by her superintendent that she couldn't have one of those posters that says "Love is Love" and "Black Lives Matter," and some other principals in our network. One, I think, helped heard her, right, and gave her love through that, but also helped her navigate that in a way that was productive and supportive. So if you have ideas for topics, if you'd like to join, if you'd like to be invited, please put that in the chat. I think Wilson has some closing too, but it looks like Joe and Sarah are going to jump in before that.
My only
I
thing
was
was
going to say, oh, go ahead, Sarah.
I was just going to say, it's a really powerful network, and knowing that there's other schools that are dealing with the same things that you're dealing with is so helpful. I mean, Joe answers his phone or his email anytime I call, and sometimes he's got better real life experience and will give me what I need to hear versus what I want to hear, that Lauren as our coach can't give me because he's from a bigger area.
I was just going to say, I really appreciate Lauren's leadership in this group too, because he does give us, really implores us and exhorts us to lead the breakouts and to lead the topics. Hey, what are the things that are concerning you guys, and then we as a group. And again, what a diverse group: Northern California, Oregon, Idaho, Colorado, Washington, and now hopefully beyond. What are the pressing things for you right now? And some of them were pre-COVID, some were in the midst of COVID, some were looking to getting out of COVID, and some were doesn't matter that COVID's going on. These are always an issue. And so some of our colleagues throughout the Pacific Northwest have fantastic leadership skills, and Lauren has helped to develop that in this area. So if you are wanting to join in on something like that, if that sounds awesome to you, we would love to have you.
And with that, we're at time, and so I'm going to ask you real quick as the tech person, here's a link to just feedback on this session. If you'd like to leave some feedback, that link will bring you there. And then I'll leave Lauren, you to close if you would like.
Yeah. I want to honor time. I'm getting all the emails.